folks, with all the attention of the last week or so being on the Midnight Alpha launch, the release of patch 11.2.5 seems to have almost gotten forgotten. That was until it released. This is of course the patch that launches the much anticipated Legion remix. Now, I don't think I'm being unfair when I say that of late, bugs have become a bit of a customary feature of any new patch release, and this one was sadly no different, with within minutes of the launch, players creating druids discovering that they were being awarded the old Mage, Tower, Feral and Guardian druid forms just for logging in. Inevitably, this triggered a repeat of the usual online discourse around the rights and wrongs of withholding those appearances in Remix. But for those of you who are pro keeping them, the news is not good, as Blizzard have already started rolling out hotfixes which will remove the errant appearances. While a very eye-catching bug, this was not the biggest issue with the release. That turned out to be server stability. With disconnections, extreme lag, and character with this name already exists errors quickly spreading out from Remix to the wider retail game, causing a ton of issues, including broken crafting orders, issues accessing warband banks, and for some very unlucky players, an issue where transferring warbound currencies would completely brick their characters. Issues of this level of severity, of course, are pretty much game-breaking and caused, understandably, a lot of frustration and even anger in the player base. Blizzard did not have a good record of handling issues like this on the communications and customer service front, and this time was sadly no different, which served to only exacerbate that frustration. Thankfully, after a couple of days for the unfortunate US players who bore the brunt of the stability issues, they do appear to be mostly resolved, leaving the WoW dev team to mop up the less serious but still very annoying bugs and minor issues. While Blizzard did publicly share a release schedule for the various phases of Legion Remix, the official end date was still to be confirmed, but this is now in the in-game calendar and will be January the 19th. Which does still leave me wondering if that particular date could perhaps be a bit of a clue about the possible timing of the 12.0 pre-patch. Looking beyond Legion Remix, and the other main feature is a revamped cooldown manager. The new version has had some major improvements, including the ability to customize it, and there is no doubt that it is far more capable than its first release was. Sadly though, at least for me, it is still not quite where it needs to be, with many specializations still missing options to track some very important buffs, such as Protection Paladin's Argent Defender. I personally did report that particular omission early in the pre-patch as a bug, so it's very disappointing to see that that report was not acted upon. At a time when the WoW dev team are trying to convince a somewhat doubtful player base that they really can manage to deliver on the so-called add-on apocalypse in a successful way. Omissions like this are, I would argue, fairly unhelpful for their cause, and it is doing nothing to address my own personal concerns about this process. Beyond the patch release itself, and this reset also saw the closure of the Mythic Raid Hall of Fame, which hit 200 over the weekend, and this freed up the WoW dev team to drop the traditional nerf bat on the final two bosses of the raid to help unblock the cutting edge guilds who are hot in the heels of the Hall of Fame guilds. As has become the norm in the War Within, the release of a new patch is quickly followed, often the same week, with the announcement of the next patch, and 11.2.7 is no different, with the WoW dev team releasing a short blog detailing the feature lineup for the patch, which is being titled The Warning. This update was pretty short, partly I suspect because most of the feature lineup had already been effectively leaked by the Midnight Alpha, but the patch itself, it turns out, is looking set to have a surprisingly large feature lineup. One surprising aspect of Dragonflight was the failure to add Battle for Azeroth to the Timewalking lineup. Ever since Timewalking had launched, every expansion had seen the feature being expanded, so this gap effectively set that Timewalking timetable timetable behind. In the War Within, that timetable was partly recovered with the inclusion of both vanilla and BFA Timewalking, but it turns out it isn't ending there, as Shadowlands Timewalking is now in the in-game calendar and will be launching just like BFA Timewalking as part of a brand new Turbulent Timeways event, which will be launching on December the 2nd and will run for 10 weeks. Through to February the 10th. Rewards wise, Shadowlands Timewalking has 3 new mounts: Bonechure's Skullbore, the Crimson Lupine, and the Snow Paw Limmerfur Prowler, all of which will cost 5,000 Time Warp badges, which means my personal hopes that I'd soon be able to start spending my badges and other stuff was a bit premature. Turbulent Timeways will also have the usual achievement for effectively doing 4 time-walking dungeons in a row for 5 weeks, and that will be rewarding amount, but it is going to be a little bit different this time around, as the achievement will be awarding a token that you can use to spend on a vendor for a choice of 1 mount out of a pool of a possible 4. How we'll get the rest of the mounts remains currently unclear. In the past, the Turbulent Timeways mounts have been added to a vendor for subsequent events. But another possibility, of course, is that future Turbulent Timeways events will also drop these tokens, allowing us to eventually complete the entire collection. No matter what though, I do have a feeling that this may not go down all that well in the community. Something that I think was a bit more predictable was that there would be some new campaign storyline, forming a lead-in to the MIndight pre-patch, and that indeed is going to be the case. This one is called Visions of a Shattered Sun and will feature a lore character that many in the community, I suspect, were starting to think that Blizzard had forgotten about. But don't worry, for anybody who doesn't like spoilers, I shall say no more in this news update. There were though a couple of surprises in the lineup, the most eye-catching of which is the return of the Brawler's Guild. Now, we don't know a whole lot about what that will entail, but we are going to see a change in the boss rotation along with the addition of some brand new bosses. And there is going to be a bunch of brand new challenges from the brokers called Gambits that seem to be offering a system for increasing the difficulty. And it will be offering us some brand new mounts, including the Brawling Bruno Crocolith and the Ballistic Bronco Rocket mount. While the launch date of the Brawler's Guild was not confirmed in Blizzard's announcement, the patch splash screen has been data mined, and this provides a date of December the 9th, which will be just 1 week into the patch. How long the Brawler's Guild will remain available though does still remain to be seen, but my personal guess is that it will be up at least through until the MIndight pre-patch. The new patch also sees the World of Warcraft development team returning to some unfinished business, with Pandaren's finally getting their heritage armor sets, which will no doubt be accompanied by a brand new quest line. In Dragonflight, the heritage quest lines were a bit variable, but the Orc and Draenei's ones were quite simply outstanding, so I personally have some high hope that this quest line will stand up to the same level of quality. This just leaves Drakthir is missing a heritage set, but in one of the recent developer interviews, the developers claimed that the Pandaren were the last to be missing their heritage sets, so I'm personally worried that that will not be changing anytime soon. One thing that is very conspicuous by its absence in the announcement is something that was teased at a developer panel back in PAX East, and that is the successor to Plunderstorm, a new spooky event that was to be set in Darkshire. Now, Blizzard have been very quiet on this front since PAX East, and I have seen quite a few people already start questioning if this feature could have been dropped from the lineup. That is for sure a possibility, but given Plunderstorm was only officially announced 2 days before it went live, I personally would not give up hope yet. Hallow's End does start in just a couple of weeks, and that might be a very good candidate for an event like this to launch. Along with all of the headline new features, this patch is also going to see a brand new level up experience for new and returning players, which will include a revamped lore working based level 70 to 80 experience. There's also going to be a War Within expansion meta achievement, which will be awarding a cool new mount, and of course the early access for player housing. With housing early access being a pre-order bonus for Midnight, I'd personally been rather doubtful that we would see it being tested on the 11.2.7 PTR due to it being publicly available. And it turns out that I was mostly but not entirely right about that. Along with the 11.2.7 reveal came the announcement of a one-day long test for that housing early access on the PTR. This will start on Monday, October the 13th at 8 PM Central European Time. That's 11 AM Pacific Time, and will last for exactly 3 days. This offers a great opportunity to get into the housing areas and scope out your housing plot, along with giving the new decoration systems a try. That said, with the PTR servers having limited capacity and having to serve a global audience, this may turn out to be a bit of a stress test, so don't be super surprised if there are some stability issues during this test. This does unfortunately pretty much confirm that a longer open access test of housing is fairly unlikely. I'd not be surprised if there aren't 1 or 2 more short testing periods, especially if the first goes awry, but don't look for the PTR to be offering you a backdoor into playing with player housing anytime soon. As well as leaking quite a bit of information on 11.2.7, the alpha has of course also been progressing, and this week's build offers Phase 2, revealing the new Zulaman zone and levelling storylines, along with a bunch of tweaks and improvements to the built-in user interface, which now offers better stacking and font scaling for the new default nameplates, and the addition of the promised ability to track debuffs to the Cooldown Manager. The Cooldown Manager is also getting a bunch of new sound and text-to-speech alerts, and some very welcome visual customization tweaks. For those of you who are hoping to see some relaxation of the restrictions that are being placed in add-ons in Midnight, there was only some very minor tweaks on offer. This wasn't very surprising, as realistically it was far too early for the dev team to start delivering on any changes based on the feedback from add-on developers. But thanks to this week's developer update, it does seem that we can expect that process of adjusting the add-on API restrictions to start in earnest next week, and this will hopefully start to reduce the currently grossly overbroad blast radius of those restrictions, which is breaking not only combat add-ons, but even some innocuous open world add-ons like the awesome Better Fishing. Something that was a little bit more concrete that emerged in week 1 of the alpha was changes to how open world battle pets are captured. Instead of having to battle the pet first, we can now just go ahead and capture it with basically no effort at all. This discovery was accompanied by reports that the new pets in Midnight didn't have any battle pet stats, leading to a conclusion that pet battling was perhaps being sunset in a similar way to archaeology, to the pet battle system. If you're a fan of pet battling, you will therefore be glad to hear that this is not the case, as Blizzard have now released a blue post revealing that instead they plan to make some changes to how the pet battle system works, to hopefully give it some wider appeal and get some more participation, as currently that participation is rather low. The very large scale class revamps have also continued this week, with the addition of Apex talents to Protection Paladin, along with some very extensive updates for talents for other specializations. After week 1, there had been some concerns about many classes being overly simplified, but it is now starting to become clear that classes are still a work in progress, and I suspect that it's going to be quite a few weeks before they stabilise enough that we can get a clear picture of where our favourite specialisations are going to land. So my personal advice at this stage is don't worry or doom, at least until we get into the beta and take a closer look. Although the full details of the Midnight gear reward system will probably not be fully unveiled until very late in the testing cycle, the announced removal of Valor Stones and changes to how crests will align with gear upgrade tracks has been raising a few questions about how it would work, but we have now been able to track down the new crest, and this has allowing us to gain a few insights. Crests are being renamed to match their respective gear tiers, starting with Adventurer's Donn crest, a brand new crest, to replace Valor Stones for the lowest gear tracks and progressing through Veteran, Champion, Hero and Myth Donn Crests. This naming convention will dovetail with another change where, for example, Hero track gear will require Hero Donn Crests all the way through its upgrade track, even when it starts to overlap with the Myth track levels. So to take a concrete example, using the War Within numbers, an item level 707 hero track item will require Hero Donn Crest to upgrade it, but a 707 myth track item would instead require a myth Donn Crest. There are of course still plenty of questions about how this will work in practice. For example, what will the new trigger be for unlocking the ability to upgrade those hero track crests to myth? And what is going to happen to Explorer track gear, which doesn't seem to have any sort of equivalent crest to upgrade them? But one other important question has though been answered. Along with the announcement that earning a hero tier appearance would grant all of the lower tiers appearances as well, came the revelation that the option of upgrading hero items to 1 out of 1 myth track levels to get the myth track appearance was going to be removed, something that inevitably got a lot of pushback from the community. In response, Blizzard have now announced that this system will be retained, with the myth appearance being unlocked when you max out your hero track item. And finally, there's a small but still very nice quality of life improvement. Currently, the portals from Stormwind and Orgrimmar to Donegal are semi-hidden away in annexes to the main portal rooms, which has left the main rooms feeling a bit odd, as they're basically just filled with mostly legacy portals. This, though, is set to change in MIndight, with the 2 new MIndight portals, one for the new Silver Moon and one for the housing area, along with that Donegal portal being moved into the main rooms. To make space, the portals to Ashran, Azuna and Borealis and Stormwind are being moved into the annex, along with the Horde portals to Old Silver Moon, Dazaralor and Azuna. While at first glance, this does seem to be a bit of an insignificant change, those secondary rooms that I personally call annexes are not super obvious if you don't know they are there, something that is a particular issue for new and returning players, so making the most relevant portals easier to find is, I think, a very beneficial change. And that's it for this week's news update. Between Legion Remix, everything that is in 11.2.7 and the MIndight Beta, which will be open to a lot more players than the Alpha, the days of end of expansion content droughts are well and truly gone. Instead, it seems this time around our biggest challenge is going to be figuring out how we're going to be able to fit all of this content into our schedules. And so it is over to you. What will you be focusing on in the coming months? Is it Lemix, Brawler's Guild, or is there another game out there that's taking up your time? Comment down below. If you found this update helpful, entertaining, and even just plain annoying, then let me know by hitting that like icon. And if you want to support my channel to grow and help me to make more of these videos along with my other content, then do hit that subscribe button right now before you forget. If you don't want to miss out whenever I release a new video, then as well as subscribing, you can follow me in social media for updates. My links in the description below as well. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.